Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the After the Frame podcast. My name is Malik, and I am joined, as always, by.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Today, we are going to be tackling The End of Oak Street. Um, this movie was directed by David Robert Mitchell, produced by J.J. Abrams, stars Ewan McGregor, Anne Hathaway. So all of those kind of mixed together made me a little bit intrigued when I saw the trailer. How did you think of this movie when you found out about it?
Yeah, I thought the same. Like looking at Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor as the male and female leads, and seeing J.J. Abrams' name on it, I'm like, it's probably going to be pretty good. And I was like, I will gladly go check it out. And I had seen. It's funny, like looking at David Robert Mitchell's name, I was kind of like, I'm like, I recognize the name, and I'm like, what have I seen of his? And I looked and like, he did It Follows, which came out a while back. I really liked that movie. And then he also did Under the Silver Lake, which has Andrew Garfield in it. I thought that one was just okay. And I completely just whoosh forgot that he had done those. And this one was pretty good. I will admit. And like going in, I didn't know what to expect. I knew it had dinosaurs and this like residential neighborhood. I didn't know much beyond that.
Yeah, I only knew the director from It Follows, like you had mentioned, and the way that that movie was made is what made me interested because of the subject matter that he dealt with in It Follows, and then I found out he's going to be doing this dinosaur movie. Seems like this suburban families moved to dinosaur times. Like it just seemed like an interesting concept to me. Um, and that's basically the movie that we get, in my opinion. I think this movie is pretty decent. It's nothing too crazy, based on, as I said, the subject matter, but it's definitely an entertaining time at the movies. I had like a good time watching it. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
all right, well, we can jump right into the stuff that works for us. You want to take a take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I have a decent amount. I think the main thing for me is this movie really nails the throwback adventure vibe that the movie has. Like it clearly wants to evoke kind of like that old school like Amblin, old school Spielberg like sense of, discovery, danger, just summer movie escape. And I think on that level, like it worked surprisingly well. Um, I thought there was a strong, nostalgic adventure energy that the movie kind of gave off that kind of felt built for honestly a really packed theater for, I know we're kind of, near the end of quote unquote summer, but I think it's something that felt more built for a packed theater than something you would just casually throw on at home and just hanging out. Um, I do think the dinosaur angle that they took is genuinely refreshing because one of the biggest wins I think is getting a dinosaur movie that is not part of the broader, Jurassic Park universe, and like those movies even recently haven't been good. Um but I think, that aspect alone kind of gives this movie some novelty. I think it was one of the better attempts at proving dinosaurs can support a completely different kind of blockbuster. Um the technical filmmaking in this movie is really strong. Between the production design, the music, the action, just the overall craft of it, are operating at a really high level. The world to me felt immersive enough that you could kind of buy into the adventure, even when the screenplay started to show some weaknesses. But definitely not cheap or sloppy. I think the filmmaking kind of gives it, legitimacy. Uh, Anne Hathaway as the lead delivers. I thought her performance was definitely the most consistent. Um, I think she gave the movie some needed emotional credibility and as well as movie star presence. I think even when the family material in the movie was weaker, she was very capable of holding the story together. Uh, the pacing of the movie really keeps things moving. I mean, the brisk runtime really keeps things moving. Um, the action doesn't really disappear for too long, which I think is exactly what a movie like this needs. I mean, the movie is not even 100 minutes. Um, it, I think this movie did a good job of understanding that an adventure movie, should feel like an adventure rather than 3 hours of mythology building. It's a very easy popcorn movie. I think there's value in a film whose primary mission is to entertain. This movie isn't going to be chasing Best Picture or anything, but it understands its lane and it delivers a satisfying enough summer escape. And sometimes you just want dinosaurs, adventure, movie stars, and just a giant screen, and this movie will give you that. And the characters honestly work well enough to make the downtime enjoyable. Like there are moments when the action pauses and there are these moments where you're spending time with these characters and it still works. And I think that matters because the best adventure movies are not just about, the creatures or the set pieces. Like you need people you actually want to follow through them. Um so overall, really good.
Okay. Yeah, you hit a lot of the same points that I think that I would have also said. The only other thing I'll mention is Michael Giacchino's score was really good in this movie. Always a fan of the stuff that he does in the movies that he's in or that he composes for. I enjoyed the 80s feel and dynamic of the movie. The family as a whole, I like how the chemistry within them actually made at least me. I don't know how other audiences felt, but I felt like to me, I actually cared about the family, which is more than I can say for a lot of characters in these type of quote unquote survival movies where it's kind of like, oh, you're just seeing random people on screen. They try and give a little bit of context to them, but really you're just there to see them get eaten. I didn't feel like that for this family, which was nice. Um, I think that just their whole dynamic as a family was really well done, and the chemistry is really well done. You already mentioned Anne Hathaway. Also, Ewan McGregor did a great job um, as the father within the family. But both of them really are the anchor that holds the whole. Their performances together holds the whole movie down. I think as co-leads, and the kids, while well acted, I think that the writing kind of let the kids down a little bit. They're basically the crux of a lot of issues in the movies, like the decisions they make. I mean, they are children, but they make a lot of like decisions that end up having Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor having to go and rescue them or doing things that that are against their survival plans. So that's more of the writing, but I thought that the kids were well acted. So yeah, those are all of the things that worked for me. I agree with the stuff that you already had touched on. I also felt like it felt like Spielberg movie as well. But I know I thought it was pretty interesting. I know that this movie, as most movies are not going to be for everyone. And a guy like commented on like my TikTok, and he was very like, I don't want to say passionately, but he was kind of adamant that like this movie was terrible. And I was like, I don't think it is terrible, but it has like elements of sci-fi that I know won't be for everyone. And he was just like, nope, it's like just objectively a bad movie. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't share that same opinion, but I just want to preface that this movie might not be for everyone, I guess. Um, which segues into the negatives. For me, I think that the movie doesn't have many negatives, I think. It's kind of what you see is what you get. Like, the plot is basically you got this family in the 80s, typical suburban family, they got their block party going on, the husband's meant to be grilling, the mom, all that stuff. And then whoosh, one day they're just taken back to the time of the dinosaurs. And, it's a romp through that. They're trying to survive and get back home. That's what you get. So there's not much to really like write home about other than that. So, for me, I felt like it was just that they didn't incorporate a good reasoning for me as to why they were taken back. They kind of like this is just it's seemingly within the plot, just like a happenstance. Like they're just taken back there. These white orbs just kind of start popping up around their neighborhood that like are bouncing between two different spaces in time, and it just for whatever reason this particular neighborhood just gets taken back there. There's really no explanation as to there was no like scientists back in the 80s doing experiments or anything, so I thought that was a little weird. I wish that it kind of gave us a little bit more context as to what was going on. I think that would have helped the plot a little bit more rather than it just being a random thing. As well as I thought that they were trying to, while they're back within the Jurassic era or whatever era of dinosaurs it was, you could tell that they were trying to veer the plot in this family is kind of broken to a certain degree, which is what they play in the early part of the movie before they even get transported back.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be, oh, they're now having to survive together. So this is where they're going to become closer as a family. And I understood that that's what they were going for. I felt that like the moment that things were kind of getting into that gear, something very drastic happens to Ewan McGregor's character. That writes him off for the rest of that time. And I felt like at that point it was while it was a good shocking decision, I didn't think the movie would have the balls basically to do that. A lot of movies don't. Um, it just felt like it was so abrupt at that time when it was kind of reaching that crescendo of the family was just beginning to gel. And then the rest of the time, you're kind of like, oh, just typical survival stuff. So I don't think that that really felt like um, too well done for me. And other than that, as I said, I already touched on the writing for the children, like particularly the son kept on doing things that, in my theater, I was just getting frustrated with, where I was like, you can't just be, if you wake up tomorrow and you know that dinosaurs are roaming around your house, there's certain like things that you would do and wouldn't do. And he's just like, oh, I mean, I'm just going to go outside and go run after my dog. I'm going to go and I'm like, come on, man. Like,
Or
just
like
stay
when,
inside.
like towards the end when they're trying to jump for
Oh,
the, he
I,
just,
I wanted Anne Hathaway to just basically just like push him off the roof. I was like, oh my gosh,
it's like,
kid,
what are you
you're holding
doing,
us
man?
back.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's just holding us back now. Just trade him for the other girl that they found and just get two daughters and just throw him away.
yeah,
Um,
just throw him
so,
away.
so yeah, those things again, like nothing on the actor who played the son or anything. I think it was just the way he was written, just for them to have the tension. Um, yeah, so those are really all of the quote unquote negatives. I just really wish that they did a little bit more with the dinosaur set piece that they created for themselves, but it just kind of seemed a lot more random to me. So, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I had a decent amount as well as like some kind of like higher level, just thoughts. I do think with this, like I kind of, both kind of touched on like the 80s nostalgia, the Amblin, like Spielberg-esque style. I do think the central issue with this movie is it is missing kind of the soul of the movies that it's imitating because it is recreating the ingredients of an 80s adventure between the music, production, the family in peril. You've got dinosaurs and you've got this grand spectacle. But like I think recreating the ingredients is not always the same as recreating the feeling. Um, I think it has like that Amblin level surface, but it doesn't always find the emotional magic underneath it. And I think with that, like you already kind of alluded to, I think the screenplay is the weak link. Like the movie is very technically accomplished, but narratively thin. Like some of the dialogue, the family material, and just the backstory aren't strong enough to support everything that the production was doing around it. I could see the blueprint of a better movie, but the writing just never fully got it there. Um, as you kind of said, the family dynamic I think is underdeveloped, and the to be a better movie, like I think you really need that family relationship to provide the heart of the adventure. But instead, we kind of got a weaker element of that. Um, I think for a broader audience, like if you do not completely buy into the family. Like the danger is just spectacle rather than doing something emotionally urgent. And like I kind of touched on the backstory a little bit. Like at times, like while it is underdeveloped and all of that, like I do think at times it was doing too much. Like there were moments where I think less is more should have been the rule. Especially in the opening. Like the opening for me was the slowest part. Um, like I think rather than explaining everything or piling on history, like with the family and everything, like I think the film probably would have benefited from stripping things down and kind of letting the adventure itself carry more of the weight. Um, it's interesting to me you brought up Ewan McGregor as a positive. I don't have his performance as a negative. I'm kind of in the middle, but I talked with a couple other people who had seen the movie, and Ewan McGregor, like I had found, was to be a major point of disagreement. Like, one person I talked to really enjoyed his character. Another saw the performance as just a serious dud. I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I like Ewan McGregor, the actor. Like, I like some of the things that he did. Other things I thought he was a little underbaked. But again, like I think the problem may be less about McGregor himself and more about what the script kind of gave him. I think if you connect with the character, like he'll add to the ensemble, but if you don't, there simply may not be enough on the page for him to overcome. Um, and yeah, like, I mean, I guess closing negatives here, like it is technically impressive, but you may not always be satisfied. Like you can admire the sets, music, action, overall execution while still kind of leaving the theater wanting more. That's kind of where I was at. Like I do see the bigger vision that this could have been. But the movie itself does provide plenty of fun moments without kind of delivering that final emotional bite that to me would separate a good throwback from a great one. So just, minor things here and there, but it's a pretty decent movie.
Yeah, I think that the idea was pretty clear that outside of them getting the big names like Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor, I think that like when this movie was greenlit, it seems as though they weren't going for anything with, they tried to do the depth thing, but like just superficially. I think that this movie is akin to, not to like put it down there because it's not as bad as some of them, but it is more akin to the more modern Jurassic World where it's like you're just there to kind of be entertained. All of the human stuff is kind of secondary
Yeah.
to being able to just see the world that they're in and the dinosaurs that are gonna be killing people around them. I definitely think that this movie I rate it better than the last Jurassic World from last year or even the one before that. I would maybe just put it right under the first Jurassic World, the first one of that new trilogy, but it's around there. It's not gonna be thought provoking. As I said, they bring up like Carl Sagan, dealing with black holes, multiverse, like time traveling, all of these things that, they could have definitely expanded more on that, but it seemed like it was just there to kind of be like, oh, this is the reason that we're over here now. And don't think too much about it. Like, oh, we're here trying to get back. That's it. So yeah, you just have to go into that movie to, as you put it, a popcorn movie, just a nice fun time at the theaters. That's all.
Yeah.
All right. What did you rate The End of Oak Street?
So I gave it a 6.8 out of 10. Um, I mean, major closing point. Like it's fun. It's technically polished. But it's more of like an escape popcorn movie than something that's gonna like emotionally grip you. But there are much worse things for a summer popcorn movie to be. So pretty good.
It is true. It is true. Yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I know the film was made for IMAX. I recommended that, if you're not too, like you or I, where we just go in and watch like a bunch of movies like a week or a month. If you're like just trying to decide, oh, where do I spend my money on this or do I spend it on that? Like, I was like, this is a type of movie that is completely fine, in my opinion, waiting until streaming. Like, it's not like you need to rush out to see it. I didn't see it in IMAX. I can imagine it was probably a better experience, just with the scale of the dinosaurs and everything. But the movie itself doesn't command that type of attention, and you need to, oh, I need to rush out to the theater now. So it's up to you. But those are my 2 cents on whether you should take it or leave it. So
Yeah, I also did not see it in IMAX, but I do think it's one of those movies, now that it came out a little while back, like it's probably not drawn as large of a crowd as it was. But I think that is where the experience would probably be peak with the most people in a theater as possible. But yeah, as far as like movie quality goes, you can definitely wait until streaming.
yeah, I agree. All right, cool. That does it for our review for The End of Oak Street. Do you still want to do the other activity that we were
Uh
talking about?
yeah, do you have a list handy? Did you
I
make one
I
or
have four. So what I did is I have like three movies, modern over the last like year, 2 years or so, and then I have like a group of movies that I just wanted to discuss as a whole.
okay.
So I kind of clumped them all into one group. So I don't have many, so it won't take me too long. I don't have like a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I told myself I was going to do 10. I have 11 because I landed on a tie at one. Um, but yeah, so I mean, the main, kind of concept for this activity was, thinking about this movie, not saying it didn't execute and fire on all cylinders, but we wanted to kind of talk about and think of, hey, what were some really great concepts that were written but just didn't adapt to the movie super well? So we just want to talk about, great concepts that really just became mediocre movies. So yeah, if you want to fire off with kind of what you have, you can dive right in.
Yeah, because it seems I have a lot less than you. So I didn't do mine in any like ranking order. I just like made a list of them. So the first one that we already did actually a review of this movie. In fact, we did a review of two of them. One I wanted to discuss was Disclosure Day, which we reviewed earlier this year. I think that this movie, how I was thinking about when we discussed a movie that had a good concept that just didn't really translate well onto screen. That movie to me was kind of how I would describe Disclosure Day. I think that Spielberg and the writers and everybody had this idea, and I think the consensus. You and I thought it was good, but when I talked to other people about the movie, I just hear words like it was boring, it's long, it like didn't get to the point quick enough, and then the reveal at the end is so underwhelming. So I think like all the ingredients were there technically about like what they were trying to portray, and then like within the movie itself, it kind of, rather than dealing so much with are we alone in the universe situation and the world finding out about it, it was more of a MacGuffin running around trying to chase this person to do this or whatever. So I think that movie was, in concept good, but like maybe they didn't execute it as well as possible. The next one for me was a very big disappointment because I was enjoying maybe like 70% of the movie, and then it kind of just fell to be a dud. Was Undertone, the horror movie. And this movie, I really thought like the sound mixing is obviously the biggest plus. We also have a review on that as well. We've already talked about it. But yeah, this movie, I think that what they were going for, compared to how it ended up looking on the screen or how it ended, making the audience feel, in my opinion, was kind of almost a night and day type of thing. I think that like the movie was basically just like taking you to a crescendo. Something's going to happen, and then basically nothing happens. So I think that maybe they were trying to stick the landing in a way that the movie itself did not really land to the audience, or at least to me. I didn't feel like that. It was an interesting concept of a podcast horror movie, that type of thing where there's literally just like one character on screen other than like her mom who was like comatose upstairs, but you're just hearing other people's voices and everything. So the concept's very interesting to me, but just did not really go well in execution. The next one to me was a straight up bad movie. This movie was adapted from a short, which is usually not always great. So this movie is Night Swim. Um, this movie came up before we had the podcast, and yeah, I think that year it was my worst movie of the year because sometimes when you have a short that has an interesting concept, like this movie of there being like this haunted pool, it is just a fun thing for a little short YouTube video. But then when you try and like put it into a screenplay and stretch it into an hour and a half movie,
Mm.
it starts to really show holes in the plot, and they're really stretching themselves into or twisting themselves into knots. So yeah, the movie wasn't scary. It didn't have the terror that I felt like it really needed to have. And again, the concept of like this pool, like you could have run with it and been more campy, but like the movie is obviously taking itself seriously, and it just did not work for me at all. Um, and then my huge clump that I did together, because this is just my opinion on how all of these movies have been so far, are all the live action Disney movies that they've made. Um, some of them are obviously better than others, but I think that from a standpoint of, I'm assuming Disney, from a money speaking aspect, I think that that's really what they're striving for. I don't think that it's like an artistic thing. So in concept, I think that, yeah, it makes sense to them. However, in execution, my issue with these live action movies are basically either A, you're copy and pasting from the original cartoon, in which case, why wouldn't we just watch the cartoon? Or B, they go ahead and do 90% of what the cartoon was and then add like a small little difference that ends up usually upsetting the audience. So again, it just doesn't make sense. Might as well we just watch the cartoon. So none of them have really, to me, justified their point in existence. Like I still, if I really want to watch Aladdin, I'm not going to watch the Will Smith one. If I really want to watch Lilo and Stitch, I'm not going to watch the one that came out, when was that, last year? These are just how I feel about it. And I think that Disney had a different idea about them when, they're just thinking like, oh, nostalgia will kick in, and people, how they did with the newer Lion King movie where they updated it. And I mean, the effects are beautiful, but I definitely would just prefer watching the original. So yeah, those are all the ones that I wanted to talk about there. I think that it's like their concept. I see where they were trying to go with it. Some of these movies bring into a modern sense, a modern idea of it, but it just doesn't work. And some of them just are too undercooked. So yeah, those are all of my thoughts on those.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. So my list, I'll go in order from like, you know, I guess, 10 to 1, work my way up as far as what could have been significantly better than what we got. Mine ranges a whole bunch of different genres. Most are in like the mid 2010 time frame, but some go back a little further. I am curious how many of these you've actually seen.
Let's
Um,
see.
so I had a tie at number 10. The first one I will talk to is a movie called Here. That came out 2 years ago. It has Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. It was, I think, Robert Zemeckis's most recent movie. And it really has an incredible cinematic premise. Like the camera is primarily fixed on one physical location, and you watch this generation of people, live, love, and age and disappear as the world like changes around them. Um, I think the premise of it, like it should really be a powerful meditation on time, mortality, memory, and really just the invisible history contained within their ordinary space, which in this film, it's pretty much all in their house. Um, and each decade should add emotional weight to that same room. But the problem with the movie for me is that the storytelling just rarely feels as inventive as the presentation that you get. Um, Instead of the location really becoming the emotional center, we often get fairly conventional family drama just viewed through a unconventional filmmaking device. Um, but by the end, like I think every corner of that space should feel haunted by everything that we've witnessed there. But instead, the gimmick that you get is often more memorable than the lives inside it. Um, I think the idea behind it could have turned four walls into the entire, human experience. But yeah, too often it just turns a normal family drama into a technically interesting one. And yeah, it could have been much better. Um, the other movie that I had tied at 10 is completely tonally different. And it's the live action Death Note that they did probably about a decade ago. Um, I'm not a big anime manga guy at all, but this is one that I actually did read and watch because it's short. Um, but the premise of Death Note is almost impossible to mess up. Like this teenager discovers a notebook that kills anyone whose name is written inside it, which immediately, raises enormous questions about justice, morality, ego, and really whether anyone should possess the power to decide who deserves to live. But you pair that teenager with an equally brilliant detective, and you have this foundation for an intense, supernatural psychological chess match. And the main character, his name is Light. He gradually convinces himself that he's becoming a god when he's powered by this notebook. The live action movie instead compresses that transformation into a much more conventional combination of teen drama, violence, and accelerated plotting, like really just kind of leaving little room for the intellectual battle or Light's corruption to develop. I think the ideal version of what we should have gotten is more like, the Zodiac movie with the Zodiac killer and David Fincher, that movie meets Breaking Bad, where two geniuses kind of slowly close in on each other as the audience watches one of them loses humanity. Someone handing a teenager the power of God should really create this terrifying psychological thriller, but Death Note somehow turned it into something much more smaller than the Notebook itself. And it's like, if you look back at the cast, like you'll see some names and you're like, what were they doing in this movie? Like Willem Dafoe is the god of death, effectively. But like Lakeith Stanfield's in it, Margaret Qualley's in it. Like there's a couple. It's a pretty small movie, but at the same time, you're kind of like, hang on a minute, like I recognize these people. Um, I think the oldest movie I have on this list is a movie called Waterworld. It came out in 1995, and it stars Kevin Costner. It's really, I think, one of the coolest blockbuster concepts imaginable. Um, the polar ice caps have melted. The entire planet is pretty much underwater, and humanity is surviving on these floating settlements, and finding dry land has almost become mythical. I think that premise, it opens the door to aquatic civilizations, strange economies, new religions, pirates, mutations, technology. Maybe Namor pops up. You never know.
Who's to say?
um, this you have this entire society that's forced to reinvent itself. In other words, it's basically a nautical Mad Max. And the movie's practical world building and gigantic floating settlements are really genuinely fascinating, but the characters and the central story are just never as compelling as the world around them. And Kevin Costner's intentionally distant mariner, like he just makes the emotional core particularly difficult to connect with. Like I think rather than simply running an action plot through this setting, like I think the movie could have explored how people trade, govern, raise children, understand history, or like, just imagine land that they had never seen. Um, Again, like really just one of the coolest post-apocalyptic worlds I think I've ever seen on film. But then the story, they just forgot to give us a story worthy of living there. Um, you'll probably get a kick out of number 8. Uh, I have The Purge, and I guess subsequently all the follow-on movies to go after it.
So just as a concept, you mean, or like?
Yeah, like I think the concept is great, but the movies just could not deliver to that. I think.
I think the first one delivers, and then all the sequels
I
kind
think
of get off the rails.
Yeah, of all of them, I do think the first one does it the best, but
The
like
first Purge,
yeah.
the movie, The First Purge, or the
Oh,
first
I
Purge
completely
movie.
forgot. I completely forgot they had a movie called The First
No,
Purge.
I knew you were talking about. I just always like, I always just find it funny when people are like, "Oh, the first one." I'm like, "Oh, you mean that? Which one are you talking about?" But I
The
know which one you
original
mean.
one, yes.
Yes. Okay.
I think that one has a premise big enough to support, entire universe of social horror, as we saw that they made a bajillion follow-on films. Um, but I
And a
mean,
TV show.
oh, that's right, they did do a TV show.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, for those of you who are not familiar with the Purge, basically for 12 hours every year, essentially all crime becomes legal, including murder. And you would think that that should radically affect class, politics, policing, insurance, relationships, revenge, all the things. But ultimately, the way people view one another once the night is over. But instead, like the first movie, really just takes this enormous nationwide experiment and really just turns it into a home invasion thriller centered on one suburban family. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that setup, but it just felt impossibly small compared with what the premise promised. Like if America has legalized crime for a night, like I want to see America. And, later installments, will eventually expand into politics, class warfare, elections, different communities, like a lot more political thriller stuff. Um, but I think, you know, those being expressed later on ultimately proved how much storytelling potential was sitting here from the beginning. Um, the premise, it's just the premise was big enough to examine an entire country and initially uses it to examine one family's security system. I would have liked to just see the movie go a little larger in scope than what we got. And sure, we got it in the sequels, but at the cost of quality. So, um, at number 7, this one might be controversial. I have the Hobbit trilogy. Um, I think I'm a big fan of the Lord of the Rings films, like, Return of the King, I would consider to be a perfect movie. Fellowship of the Ring is very close. Two Towers is also very close. Like that whole trilogy is probably one of, if not my favorite trilogy of films. But returning to Middle Earth to adapt The Hobbit with Peter Jackson, I think should have been one of the safest bets in fantasy filmmaking because you've got Bilbo, you've got Gandalf, you've got 13 dwarves, you've got this treasure, giant dragons, and just, one beloved adventure in a world that audiences have already adored. But I think the problem is practically contained in the word trilogy because unlike The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit was just one book. And it's a relatively compact story that got stretched across 3 enormous movies that need extra villains, mythology, romances, action, and connections to The Lord of the Rings to really justify their scale. Um, and from the films, in my opinion, I thought Bilbo frequently got pushed to the side in the movies named after him. And the heavier reliance on CGI compared to the Lord of the Rings trilogy kind of made Middle Earth feel less tangible than it did in the, coming out a decade earlier. Um, I don't think the material, really needed another apocalyptic epic. It just needed one tremendous adventure or maybe 2 films at most with Bilbo at the center and Smaug as the destination. I think The Hobbit didn't need to become the next Lord of the Rings, which it was trying to do. It just needed to be the best version of The Hobbit. And I don't know, I think that trilogy could have been so much more. Have you seen Lord of the Rings, Hobbit? Have you seen any of those? No?
Nope. And I have no interest in seeing them. Recently, uh, my fiance watched the first one with her dad, and she was just like me. She's like, I don't really have an interest in it. And she said she watched the first one. She's like, oh, it's pretty good. But she was, yeah, those movies. I mean, I'm a big fan of Harry Potter and everything, but I don't know. I'm just the kind of guy where it's like when I hear the plot of that movie, I'm not too interested, especially with how long the movies are. Like for me to sit
Yeah.
down when I'm already not like locked into the idea. So maybe at some point in life I'll give it a go, but every time I'm just like, I'd rather watch something else. But
Yeah,
I have respect for it.
you would probably get sick at the extended edition length.
Snyder cut length, probably, if not more.
How long was the Snyder Cut? 4 hours?
4 hours.
So the whole trilogy, the extended cut trilogy, is probably about 11 and a half hours across 3 movies.
Across 3 movies. Listen, how I look at it is that like if it's within the realm of a world that you really enjoy, 11 hours means nothing. So it's just different strokes for different folks because if it's something I enjoy, like I always bring up the whole thing where it's like 3 hour movies. When I watch the Batman, it doesn't feel like 3 hours. So it
Right.
just depends on what you're enjoying. It's just a difference in what you like, what fantasy you like, what you don't. That so yeah, but I know that one of them, I forget which one it is. One like Best Picture, one year. So I know it's a very highly regarded trilogy. So I have huge respect for the actors that are in it and the movies how they're made and everything. I just was never too interested,
Hey,
but
yeah, if it's not for you, not for you.
yeah.
Um, Number 6 for me is actually a Star Wars movie, and like I'm a big Star Wars fan. At number
Mm.
6, I have Attack of the Clones.
Oh,
So
that's controversial.
I know. I think this like Attack of the Clones really contains all the ingredients for an incredible Star Wars political thriller. We see the Republic collapsing, thousands of systems are just threatening to leave. This mysterious clone army has been commissioned in secret. Someone is manipulating, both sides toward war. And we start to see Anakin Skywalker beginning the emotional descent that will eventually create Vader. Um, Yet, I think that there were enormous ideas that repeatedly fell flat in execution, especially with the romance between Anakin and Padme, which really needs to be the emotional foundation of the tragedy, but often felt too unnatural to fully sell his later downfall. I think they handled it better in Revenge of the Sith, but in this movie alone, it just wasn't there. Um, Meanwhile, like Obi-Wan is investigating Camino and the clone army. Like I think that's arguably the movie's most compelling thread, but the fascinating questions behind it kind of never receive the sustained mystery treatment that they should. Um, Anakin also needed to feel like a potentially great man showing increasingly troubling cracks rather than someone so openly unstable that everyone around him should already be concerned. Um, Episode 2 contains the ingredients for the best political thriller in all of Star Wars, and we didn't get that. And somehow the thing everybody remembers is sand. And like I'm one to poke jokes at that. Like I hate sand. It's coarse. It gets everywhere. Um, but like that is those sorts of things are what everybody remembers. Like there's the meme of Anakin and Padme like in the flower field, and it's just Anakin just like hitting with the stare down like that. Those memes are funny, but like the movie as a whole, we could have gotten so much better.
Let me ask you something. Would you say that Star Wars is your favorite franchise fandom, like within the sci-fi fantasy realm?
Within, ooh, probably.
Okay. So would you since you brought up episode 2, would you not say that like the whole prequel trilogy is your opinion that maybe that whole prequel trilogy didn't really stick the landing in concept, or is it particularly just that one in your opinion?
So I definitely don't think it's the worst Star Wars movie. I think it's the weakest of the prequels
Oh, a lot
by
of
a
people
slim
say the.
margin.
Oh, okay, yeah. A lot of people I feel like say episode one.
They are close for me. I think I have to err on the side of Attack of the Clones. Um, I think Revenge of the Sith is easily the best one, but
Hmm.
they definitely did not meet the mark of the original trilogy. Um, I am actually like comparing the prequel to the original, like that's a bar that it was never gonna hurdle. Um, Comparing it to the sequel trilogy, like I'm actually a fan of the sequel trilogy outside of Rise of Skywalker. If you want to count the Clone Wars movie as like a mainline Star Wars movie, like that one's the worst one. Um, but outside of that, like I think the I think the expectations were just sky high and kind of similar to what we got with the original trilogy. Like uh George Lucas did the story for the originals, but they were all directed by different people, which I think could have added. So I'm going to say that, and then this is going to be a contrarian point in a second. Um, I think having different directors amongst the original trilogy kind of added some different perspectives on how the story was going to pan out. Um, George Lucas did all three of the prequels. So basically, what he said goes, and at the cost of quality, I guess. And like even in the sequel trilogy, like they almost were all done by three different directors. But it was kind of playing ping pong. Like the seven movie, Force Awakens was done by J.J. Abrams. Last Jedi was done by Ryan Johnson, and then Rise of Skywalker almost wasn't even Rise of Skywalker. It was almost done by I'm looking up his name now. Um, it was almost done by let's see. It was almost done by Colin Trevorrow, who did Jurassic World and Jurassic World Dominion. Um, he did another movie that like absolutely flopped, like absolutely stunk. And he was supposed to do the Star Wars 9 and Disney pulled him. But uh, uh, the sequels are a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
I'm a fan of the franchise, but yeah, like I think the prequels are definitely a step down from the original. But again, like I don't think they were ever gonna get up there. So
Okay, carry on. I see. I see.
um number five, we're in the top five now. A lot of these are very different. I think there's two that kind of overlap a little bit. So number five, I have a movie called Yesterday.
The
Came out.
Beatles movie.
That is the Beatles movie.
Okay.
It really asks an extraordinary question, like what happens if one struggling musician really just wakes up in a world where the Beatles just never existed, and this guy is the only person who remembers their stuff. I think that premise could interrogate whether musical greatness survives outside its original cultural context. Whether songs like Yesterday or Sergeant Pepper would still connect in the modern streaming era, and how psychologically devastating it would be to become the world's greatest songwriter by taking credit for masterpieces no one can prove that you stole. Um, but instead, the movie gradually becomes a much more conventional rom-com, and it leaves its most fascinating questions largely unexplored, in my opinion. Like, I think, maybe some Beatles songs would still become classics, maybe others would completely fail, and maybe, the main character would discover that great music cannot simply be separated from the people, the production, the timing, or the culture that really helped create it. Um, I think the movie asks, one of the coolest questions that you could ever think of about music. And then it spends way too much of its runtime answering this completely different question about whether this guy should date Lily James's character. And it could have been much better.
Yeah.
Um, Number four actually has some overlap with former Star Wars cast members in Mr. Hayden Christensen and Samuel L. Jackson. It's a movie called Jumper.
Yeah.
Jumper is really just kind of it gave its characters this absurdly great superpower, the ability to teleport instantly anywhere you can visualize without portals, vehicles, or travel time. And like I think that ability alone can raise fascinating questions about crime, money, borders, war, how you survey people, but also on a personal level, like relationships, travel, your identity. And the movie introduces this secret organization that has hunted teleporters for centuries. That provides enough mythology for an entire franchise. But unfortunately, the cast and the story surrounding it are much less interesting than the power itself. Like, the main character, his name is David, played by Hayden Christensen. He uses teleportation to fund this attractive lifestyle until the plot finally catches up with him. While this ancient, the organization is called the Paladins. The Jumper Paladin conflict is introduced without enough depth to really become compelling. I think a better version could have started small, almost like have you ever seen Chronicle? Like where the
Yeah,
like
the
three
Michael B.
yeah.
Jordan. Yeah. Hmm.
I think you could have started almost like that, where you're exploring how unlimited movement, changes someone psychologically before gradually revealing the larger war and the mythology around it. Jumper, has a superpower good enough. Like, who doesn't want to not drive anywhere? Just wish I could teleport and boom. You can build a franchise around it and somehow makes teleporting anywhere on Earth just feel ordinary. Um, Number three, it's funny. I actually just recently rewatched this movie on a plane because I was bored and I wanted to rewatch it. I think that was kind of where the concept came from this list. Um, at number three, I have In Time with Justin Timberlake. Um,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think I think this movie may have the smartest sci-fi metaphor on this entire list
Mm.
because everyone stops aging at 25, and from that point forward, time literally becomes money, with your remaining lifespan just displayed on your arm, and every paycheck, purchase, bill, financial decision directly will add to or subtract from your life. And the poor literally live paycheck to paycheck while the wealthy accumulate centuries, which allows the movie to explore inequality, inflation, inheritance, but also the darker side with crime, employment, unemployment, and class without any metaphorical distance at all. But rather than fully interrogating this remarkable economic system, like the story eventually becomes a much more conventional chase movie with this Bonnie and Clyde structure. I think it left the movie more interesting than the plot really taking place inside it. Again, like staying very on brand with this list, like there's enough material here for an entire series, simply explaining how different classes behave when every minute has a monetary value. Um, Again, like one of the smartest sci-fi economies I think could ever be conceived, but then it's used as the backdrop for Justin Timberlake just running around a lot. So I would have liked to see much more out of that. It like
Yeah.
for me it was a good plane watch because it killed 2 hours, but it's just the I think we could have gotten much more. Um, at number two, I have Hancock starring Mr. Will Smith. It's a superhero movie in a way. Um, Basically, Will Smith plays Superman, except he's an alcoholic, depressed asshole who hates being a superhero.
Don't call him that.
What am I gonna do? Get slapped? Oh no. He uh he just hates being a superhero. He hates the lifestyle, and he causes millions of dollars in collateral damage whenever he saves anyone. Like, the first half of the movie really proves how well that concept works because you follow Hancock's disastrous rescues, and Jason Bateman is like effectively his lawyer. He's attempting to rehabilitate his public image, and Hancock voluntarily goes to prison so society can experience what happens when its most powerful protector disappears. Like, there was an entire great movie in this combination of superhero satire, celebrity culture, loneliness, responsibility, redemption. But then the story abruptly pivots into this complicated mythology involving Charlize Theron and her character, and it becomes a very different romance action movie. Like, I think that mythology might have supported another story, but here it just interrupts the far more interesting one that's already going on. And this is one of the only movies where you can exactly pinpoint the moment that a potentially great movie gets interrupted by a less interesting movie. Like, it just completely switches tone midway, and it's just like, what are we doing? And it just goes downhill for me. And at number one, I have a movie that's called Downsizing. Has
Oh.
Matt Damon and Kristen Wiig in it. Downsizing is it has this premise that's so rich that it really feels like it should generate dozens of stories. It's essentially a real life take on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Um, Scientists discover this safe way to shrink humans to roughly 5 inches tall, and they find a way to dramatically reduce resource consumption while also allowing ordinary people's money to go exponentially further in miniature communities. Suddenly, like, environmentalism, capitalism, class, immigration, I can go on and on. Like, all sorts of economic factors just change at once. And the movie initially raises fascinating questions about whether shrinking is genuine environmental progress or simply another luxury product, and what happens when millions of people reorganize their lives around it. Then, astonishingly, the movie gradually moves away from the very idea that made it interesting to me, shifting between satire, drama, romance, and existential comedy until being, 5 inches tall sometimes feels almost irrelevant. The I think a stronger version would have looked something like the utopian sales pitch firsthand, and then slowly reveal the consequences of restructuring civilization around miniature humanity. Because who knows what that would look like. Um, I have Downsizing at number one because the question of, what if humans could shrink themselves to save the planet and become rich, like, that should generate an entire cinematic universe of ideas. But yeah, halfway through the movie, like, the concept of being 5 inches tall just barely felt important anymore.
Cool. Well, I mean, the audience cannot complain. They basically got like 15 reviews in one
They really
video.
did. Yeah.
So, I mean, they were short reviews nonetheless, the mini ones that we just kind of went through. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, our lists are our lists, and those are our thoughts on it. So yeah, I mean, we will probably next week. I think I'm thinking we do a review on Tony, which I'll be watching. I'm actually looking forward to that movie. So I'm thinking that's going to be our next episode, and then we'll come up with another little activity to do after. And yeah, you have any more thoughts on the activity we just did, or End of Oak Street? Anything else you wanted to say?
No, I mean, I guess closing point. Hopefully, y'all enjoyed our many reviews. If you have ideas for other like activities or things that you would want to hear takes on movie wise, things that could be better, things that may be a little controversial, let us know. We're always looking to take some feedback and see what we can do to keep y'all's interest.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we will catch you all in the next episode. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.